I want to thank you all for joining us so that we could hear Dr. Tony Dickerson speak today. Dr. Dickerson is the founding president of the Akoma Nitoso Modern Quilt Guild of Central Indiana. She began sewing at 6 years old and received her first sewing machine that year. She came from a family that has a genuine love for sewing. She's born and raised in Indianapolis and has earned multiple degrees from Lincoln University, University of Central Missouri, and University of Missouri, Kansas City. In 2019, she earned her doctorate in Educational Leadership and Policy Studies from the University of Kansas. She came back home in 2017, and she's now serving as the Dean of Education from Martin University School of Education. She is nationally recognized as a quilter and is also a member of 8 local and national quilt guilds. Today, Dr. Dickerson's topic will cover the question, what are the contributions of Black quilters to the arts, and how have they used this medium as a vehicle for storytelling? I'm going to now pass the mic to our guest speaker, Dr. Dickerson. Dr. Dickerson, it is a great honor to have you here, and welcome to Elkhart Public Library, and thank you for coming to speak with us today.
Thank you. And thank you to Raquel. I've spoken with Raquel when she was on the north west side of the state, and she invited me for another presentation, so thank you. It's the librarians that keep me coming around the state to speak, so I appreciate you very much. I have been in education for almost 40 years. I've been trying to retire. I told Martin University they get me until June of 2026. They don't believe it. My daughter and my son-in-law, they don't believe it. But I'm telling you, if the gigs keep going like this and I get to talk about quilting all day, then I am retiring, okay? Born and raised. I'm sitting because in 2023, August 13th to be exact, a 17-year-old cut me off on Benford. And I don't know if you all know Benford Boulevard in Indianapolis. It's pretty thank goodness they found out I wasn't speeding. But we go pretty fast on Benford. So I broke both legs and my hip. Spent about 4 months in a rehab center. So I'm learning how to walk again. And it's just taking time. So I apologize for sitting. But that is the reason why. And what happened was everything like ticks off to something else. And I am the founding member of a quilt guild and unfortunately lost my mom to Alzheimer's. And so one of the things that quilt guilds do is we create charity quilts. And so unfortunately I lost a sister to lupus. I have a great nephew who has MS, but a lot of our members have family members who have died from Alzheimer's or who are currently living with Alzheimer's now. So our guild decided we were going to give back to the Alzheimer's Foundation. And every year we do a charity quilt in honor of Alzheimer's. We all get together, people make separate blocks. I put the blocks together, somebody else quilts it, and then we raffle it off. We are raffling off a quilt this year. Usually Crimson Tate, has anybody heard of the fabric store Crimson Tate in Indianapolis? Raffles it on their website, but we've been going around to different places raffling it off, and I'll put the information on our website also about that. So the proceeds go to the Alzheimer's Foundation. So somebody from the Alzheimer's Foundation saw the quilt and said, we saw this beautiful quilt that you did. Have you ever done anything for the longest day? And I said, I don't know what the longest day is. And so the longest day is a day that is on the longest day of the year, which is usually June 21st, and called the solstice. So the longest one in the summer, not the winter. And what you do is what you do. So if you can fruit, you say, oh, I'm canning fruit for the longest day. And if you would like to give a donation to see how many cans of fruit I can in a day, then all that money would go to Alzheimer's. One guy, cut his hair a different, like every day he would cut his hair a different way until it was all gone, and people tuned in and they gave money on the longest day. So I said, okay, we'll do the longest day. I mean, we already had the quilt, we did it. Somebody saw that and said, hey, could you come and speak for the Indiana Hoosiers Women at Work symposium that we do? And it was online because it was during the COVID period, and it was actually, we were coming out of the COVID period, and they said, but we still want to do it online because people are still squeamish. And I said, yeah, I'll do that. So I was a keynote, and the other keynote was the lady who was who did the history of roller derby. And I'm like, well, oh, that's appropriate because we were a roller derby family. We went to State Fair. I don't know if you all remember, but they used to have roller derby things there. So they saw that, and then somebody else said, oh, well, I saw your keynote on quilts. Could you do something for Indiana Humanities? So it just kept snowballing. And so as that snowballed, I had this chance to do this topic. And the original topic is called Black Quilters, Hard Topic, Soft Blows, where I talk about a book called All That She Carried, the story of Ashley Sack. And that was Indiana's One State, One Story, 2023? Mm-hmm. 2023. And so that's how the librarians found me, because I was tied to the One State, One Story. And what I do is I connect the four key concepts that Dr. Taya Miles has in that book with quilts that I already made. Because what I have found is that not for, let's see, well, how can I put it? Well, most of my friends who are Black quilters, we quilt story quilts. And it's not that we don't make baby quilts. Like, baby quilts are my favorite quilts. For that presentation, I usually started out with my beautiful purple X's and plus. Why are you shaking? It seems like I've seen, have you been in? Yeah, you've been in one of my presentations.
I've been there before. I'm just really
You haven't? Because you're saying it at the right time, and I'm like, you look familiar too. So anyway, so I usually show that to show that, yes, I do baby quilts, and I do modern quilts of different things, but for some reason we did a lot of story quilts. And so that book is about slavery. It's about Ashley being sold from her mother, Rose, and the fact that she just takes a sack and she puts in an old tattered dress. She puts in 4 handfuls of pecans, 3 handfuls of pecans. She puts in a lock of her own hair and all of her love. And from that tenet, Dr. Miles creates an entire book that says, here's how those things transpose or cover lots of African Americans, lots of people who were dealing with slavery at the time. This is Negro cloth. This is what tattered dresses look like. This is why their clothes were so tattered, because Negro cloth is the cheapest, dullest fabric. And South Carolina, where Ashley Sack probably emanated from, put a law in 1735 saying that, you know what, your enslaved people walk around looking kind of spiffy. You might want to do something about that. And so they passed a law saying that the clothing had to look a certain way. We needed to separate the classes of people. And so that speaks prominently in some things that have happened in terms of African Americans in clothing. So I talk about those things. I'm kind of talking about those things today because it's still on telling stories, but today is really about being a social activist and telling stories in different ways, okay? So one of the operational things is because I've told different things different ways, I have to always give myself, I'm an educator, you don't have to look at these because some of them get kind of wordy. I need them because otherwise I can talk an hour about this quilt right here, you know? And so it keeps me, controls me in my operational theme. So my first quote, I was watching, do you all know Henry Louis Gates?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm hooked on your roots. Yes, and I'm also hooked on who do you think you are? And I'm also hooked on genealogy. What's the one that go around? Antique Roadshow. They have one called Genealogical Roadshow. I like all of those shows, okay? And so I was watching Henry Louis Gates, and one of the things that they talked about was how people control the narrative. The daughters of the Confederacy control the narrative of what happened in the South with the Civil War, after the Civil War. So what they said were a couple of things. Number one, the Civil War was not about slavery, it was about states' rights. And so when you push that narrative, then what you do is you say, we didn't lose because people didn't like slavery. We didn't lose because people were against the fact that we had a 3/5 rule and the Missouri Compromise. That's not. It was just because of states' rights. And then they said, oh, and you know what? Slavery wasn't that bad. I mean, if you look at the great homes that they lived in and the plantations, and you know what they did on Sunday, right? They got to go to church, and you know they sang a lot, so they kept their culture. And so, oh, you know what? Our gentlemen, you know, we have to build monuments. So if you look at the years that they were building the Confederate monuments, it wasn't right after the Civil War. Right? We have to get this narrative crafted, and we have to tell this story. And then the last thing that they do, and I'm going to bring this up again, is they put books in the hands of children. If you wonder why people ban books, all right? Because the word says, you know, in the Black culture, we use the word, and we'll just say that, like if somebody says, you know, life is like a box of chocolate, we would say word. Like, we mean that that's not only a word, but it is the word. It is the Bible. It's a universal truth, right? And so if you want to truly stamp a story, you put it in the hands of children. And so when you want to stop children from being critical thinkers, you take books from them. Okay, so banning books, putting certain books in front of children stamps the narrative that people try to tell. So this is the book, All That She Carried. Okay, and when I tell you, it is a fantastic read. You want to do that. And I always tell people, don't read this book like a book of fiction. Like, don't even read it straight through. Say, I'm interested in learning about hair. And then just read the chapter about hair, because it is a heavy, heavy book. You're going to read about people who half their head was shaved and they were pulled through barbed wire fences and they were killed. You're going to read about people who... one young lady, she made an outfit that was not made out of Negro cloth, and then she made a bonnet. And when she made that bonnet, she stepped out of her class of being an enslaved person. They burned the bonnet because that was the item of the day. Women were told, if it's the item of the day to wear a bonnet. And so she broke so many laws and expectations by doing that. So when you read this book, don't try to read it in a setting like, say, I want to just learn about hair today. I just want to learn, and then read those sections. And this book right here is fantastic. Matter of fact, I will say this. I used to be a prolific reader, and then I got my doctorate, and then I stopped reading, and this book got me reading again. Okay, so I will say that about this book. So in talking about the Daughters of Confederacy, one of the operational themes that Dr. Henry Louis Gates brought up in a documentary that I was watching is, he who controls the past controls the future. And that's the narrative about the past. All right? So if I tell you this thing happened, and I say it loud enough, and I say it often enough, it becomes truth. It is a George Washington slept here kind of moment. All right? It is Abraham Lincoln is an honest person because he did not he chopped down the cherry tree and he told his dad, I cannot tell a lie. Now, how many cherry trees did he actually chop down? Okay, but if we get that narrative out there, we control people's thinking about things, okay? So the major points I want to bring out today is I'm going to talk quickly about the history of quilts. I'm going to talk about using quilts to tell stories, narrative quilts that were created and how they're used in social justice instances, and then telling stories actually about quilts. All right, so not that the quilt is about a person, but we talk a lot, and that's why I brought all these books today, is because we talk a lot about quilts in books now, okay? So the history of quilts. How many quilters are in the room? Ooh, so I don't have to do a whole lot explaining. You know what the deal is on quilting. How many people own quilts? Like quilts. All right, so you know a quilt is 3 pieces, right? You have your top, you have your middle, which is your batting or some kind of fabric in the middle. I have a friend, I call her Mama Freeman. She is my friend's mom, and she makes quilts where she hand quilts them and she ties them. And when I call her quilts Big Berthas, I have like 3 or 4 of them because they are the heaviest quilts I've ever touched in my life. And she will not tell people what her batting is. I think they're other quilts because they are heavy, okay? And so, that third part is your backing. Your backing can be a sheet, it can be old clothing, or it can be pieced. And my story about that is my daughter got a quilt. I've only been quilting now for 11 years. I've been sewing the entirety of my life. I am not from a family of quilters, although my mother started quilting at 50. I started quilting at 50. And my mother quilted everything by hand. She did everything by hand. And I am not a hand quilter, although I'm going to show you a hand quilt. That's because I push myself a little bit as a quilter. But when I was setting out to learn quilts, people often say, well, how did you learn how to quilt? Well, I always give honor to Jeannie Doan. And I give honor to Jeannie Doan because I have tried to watch other quilters' videos and they talk too much. Like, I'm a dog lover, don't get me wrong. I lost my star May 2nd, and I cry about that dog almost every day since it happened. But I don't need to hear about your dog when I'm trying to learn a quilt. Like, just get to the quilting part, okay? And so Jeannie Doan gives very straightforward ways to make that quilt. And here's the neat thing, it's only 8 to 10 minutes. So if you miss anything, start it over because she's gonna say, this is how you do it. She's just, you know, how many people have been to Hamilton? Whew. Yes, in Kansas City, Missouri. I live close to it. I went the first time for my birthday. People were so jealous. Oh my God. And it is that kind of place. 2 blocks. She took 2 blocks and turned it into quilter's heaven, you know? And so, but if people say to you, how do I learn how to quilt? I always say, watch Jeannie Doan of Missouri Star Quilt because she's not going to steer you wrong. And she gets in there, she tells you, and you can do it again and again and again. So she was my favorite one. And also Pinterest. I love Pinterest. I love doing that. So we have these 3 layers, you quilt. And the story I was going with my son-in-law is sometimes you make quilts that it's just what you see is what you get. If you turn that quilt over, it's just blank on the back, right? Or you can do what I call twofers, right? You got the front piece, you got the back piece, and they look like 2 different quilts. So my son-in-law wants a quilt. I've told my family, I am just into quilting. Like, I'm really into it, but I do a lot of applique quilting. But I'll get around to you, but kids come first. Because baby blankets take 2 hours, you know? Your quilt may take 2 months. So no, I'm gonna go through the kids first. So he's waiting patiently for a quilt. My daughter got her master's, I made her a quilt. She has the quilt on the bed. She goes into the guest room and she flips the quilt. He almost lost it. Your mom made you 2 quilts? I'm waiting for a quilt. She said, what are you talking about? Your mom made you 2 quilts? She said, I just flipped the quilt over. Like, I just wanted to see the other side. And he runs in the bedroom and goes, oh, okay. So, you know, but I'm happy that he wants a quilt because I coined this phrase among my friends that some people won't get a quilt from me. And I say, I love you, but I don't know if I quilt love you. All right, and so some people might not get a quilt from me. I don't know. All right, quilts may have originated as early as ancient Egypt. The popularity has continued to grow. I threw this out. He told me he was filming today, and I said, you know, I've gotten used to seeing mistakes of what I say, but I'm going to get this one right. We spend about $3.5 billion on quilting. It is not a cheap venture. And most people who quilt are in their 60s, and most make about 60,000 plus a year. Quilting is not cheap. Now, my favorite quilts, I will tell you, have been from upcycled fabric. Like if I made an FMS quilt for my nephew, great nephew, who's suffering from muscular dystrophy, dystrophy, and sclerosis, MS. Mm-hmm. Yes, multiple sclerosis. Thank you. And I did not buy blue jean fabric. I went to the Goodwill and I went on Senior Citizen Day and I got them for 50% off. Okay, so that's how I make blue jean quilts. I have a student who went into the Army. I made her one of those round ones where you fold the little piece in the middle, and that was all blue jean. I went to the Goodwill. So I do upcycle. But you know, the famous thing that we have is that stash. And some of us, we have better stashes than we have quilts, all right? We like fabric. Matter of fact, I have a friend who teases me quite a bit. I don't tell her this anymore, but I used to say, I'm out of batiks. I'm just out of batiks. I need to get more batiks. And she'll go, you're out of batiks. You're out of batiks. Well, I'm not out, but it's low. Like I can see the end game, so I need more batiks, okay? So our stash is very, very important to us, all right? And what we have found is that most quilts were tied to us economically. Like there was no Joann Fabrics. Unfortunately, when I told that saying back a year ago, we still had Joann Fabrics. So now you go to Joann Fabrics, someone tell us we're going to Michael's, right? And so, but think about it, if we had Negro cloth for African Americans and enslaved people, remember that everybody, when we were making dresses out of the flour sacks, the people who were manufacturing said, you know what, let's put little flowers on them for them since they're using it anyway. So they did something nice for us, right? But we didn't have fabrics. Most of the things that we made were from scraps. And if you look at this quilt here, this is one of our charity quilts, and my brother won it. And I promise you, it was not a setup, but I promise you this, he spoke that quilt into his life. He said, I'm buying this raffle ticket. When do I get my quilt? I'm like, James, it's a raffle. Yeah, but when do I get my quilt? And he would call me up periodically. When do I get my quilt? And the last day of the year, I put, well, actually what I did was one of our guild members was in the hospital. I had her, we went to go visit her. I had her pull 25 names from the thousands of names we had in the bucket. I put those 25 names on a wheel. I then went to the wheel, pushed the button in live, and it went. I said, oh, Yvette won the quilt. Click, oh, James won the quilt. That's my brother James, and he came over. Now, he comes to see me maybe once, 4 times a year, and he lives not too far from me, right? But he came over quickly to come and get that quilt, right? That's called a, what kind of quilt? A string quilt. And here's the thing about string quilts. It's very difficult to tell who made string quilts back in the day. Black woman made it, white woman made it, poor woman made it, because we all were using scraps. All right, and in some ways, we were also quilting together sometimes, okay? And so this quilt style has survived, and we're using just modern fabrics with very old types of quilt types, okay? And so we're still using those types today. So using quilts to tell stories. A story is a reference point, and it frames our life. You know, when we tell stories, we set us up for joy, or sometimes we bring it down for, all right? The process of telling stories, so you notice that is in yellow. I put the word frames, and I changed it just yesterday. Because at first when I looked at it, I put the process of telling stories makes our lives more important. No, we are already important, right? Your grandbaby is the most important grandbaby in the world, right? Your grandbaby. When you make that quilt, or when I get a thrill out of the fact that my great nieces and nephews will not go to bed without their quilt. And so it doesn't make our lives more important. It just frames the importance of our lives. We get to solidify it through our stories, right? And so that's why telling stories are important, all right? Our private lives become this collective story together. And that's kind of going back to All That She Carried, because what Dr. Miles does is she takes a very intimate story about one family and she makes it a collective story about a lot of people and what may have happened to everybody. Okay, and so they also serve as memorials. In some of the books that I brought, I pulled out some things, like in this book here, when you see the little post-it, you're going to see that there's stories about a memorial quilt for a father. All right, there's a book out now called Quilts of Souls, where the author talks about the fact that her grandmother was the community quilter, and when someone died, you brought over their clothing so that she could create a quilt from them. There's a young lady on the internet. She takes clothing and she makes bears out of them. Unfortunately, the very first quilt I ever made, I lost a 6.5-year-old great niece to meningitis, and I took her starched blue jeans and her gingham shirts that my mother used to put on her, and I made a quilt, a memorial quilt for her. So we memorialize quilts and to tell stories.
Is that more of a tradition in the Black culture?
Well, actually, the story in this book is not. We all do it. That's the transferring of how we all tell stories with quilts. Is because that's just what we do. You know, we either give and gift grandma's quilts to grandchildren. I used to tell a story for my first one, and I'll tell it really quickly. Again, you know, I came to town, I told you, because my mom had Alzheimer's. I found a house, you know, location. I always wanted to live in the Broad Ripple area, so I live right at the end of the Broad Ripple area, and it's a ranch. And I am not an open concept person, so I was like, I don't want to live in a house where there's an open concept. I don't want to see a kitchen. There's nothing special about kitchens, right? And so I walked in this house, and this house was like perfect for me. And when my niece died and my great nieces and nephews came to stay with me, my niece was about 8 years old at the time, and I just wanted to be an aunt and make her life like better. And I said to her, you know, Adrian, when I go, you and Emmy can have this house and you two can live together. And she goes, I don't want to live in this house, and I don't want to live with Emmy. And I said, oh, okay. She said, but I'll take your quilts. I said, oh, okay, a woman who knows what she wants. And so passing down, I always say it's a flex if somebody says, oh, my great aunt made this quilt, or my grandmother made this quilt. We tease a great nephew of mine because he has a piece of fabric that is this big, and it's raggedy, and it's from a quilt that my mother made him, and he keeps it under his pillow. He's 24 years old. And I made him a quilt. His favorite player is Kevin Durant. He won't even take it out of the package. He's like, no, because he knows that quilts are textile and they'll disintegrate. So he won't even touch his Kevin Durant quilt anymore. But those memorial things that we do with quilts are we all do it. We all do it. Let me go back real quick. I'm sorry. The picture you see here is my great niece, Demira Jean, and my sister, Bobby Jean. She couldn't hide from the word Jean, name Jean if she wanted to. Her name is Demira Jean. My sister's name was Bobby Jean. My name is Tony Jean, and her maternal grandmother was Deborah Jean. So I actually made her a quilt that has Jean in big print, and then it has Demira over the Jean, and then it has flowers because her father calls her Tulip. So yeah, she couldn't escape Jean if it saved her life, but she never met my sister. And so our very first exhibit for Akoma in Nitoso was at the St. Luke Missionary Methodist Church, and we did a portrait exhibit for the women in our life for Women's History Month in March. And she did one of her grandmother, Bobby Jean. And so to her, Bobby Jean, her grandmother, is immortalized in this quilt. And she got a little bit closer because one of the things that we all talk about with this quilt is that she captured my sister's smile. Like, my sister was a little short woman who smiled all the time, and she smiled through lupus. And so even with lupus, she was always smiling. So we felt she really captured that with her. So that's an intimate story. And so when I did the one about all that she carried, I talked about how Dr. Miles took intimate stories and made them universal. So if you walked into that exhibit, you're only gonna know that that's a pretty smiling blue woman, right? And that's my sister, and I would have to tell you the backstory. Well, this is my grandmother. And here's the weird juxtaposition. I didn't know my grandmother either. My mother was an orphan, and she died when my mother was 14, so I never met my grandmother either. But this tells a more universal story of what happened to a lot of African American people. And that is because as an educator, I used to teach genealogy to my 8th graders. Independence, Missouri has one of the largest freestanding genealogy libraries in the country. And I would take my students to do genealogy, and the librarians adopted us then. Like, they would put out flyers, 8th graders coming to tell we would do competitions in my class, and the top 5 could present their genealogy stories. And so I had been looking for my family for about 10 years, and I couldn't find information about them. But to be fair, remember, we used to look through the sound index, and we used to look through the microfiche, right? And I just couldn't find them. But my mother was calling my grandfather Bogue Carr. All right, she said, look for Bogue Carr, look for Bogue Carr. And I just couldn't find a Bogue Carr. And so I put my students to their projects, and I said, well, I'm gonna go over here now and see if I can find my family. And I go, zoop, 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 and up pops my family. And I'm like, oh my God. And the first thing that pops into my head is, where have you been? We've been waiting here for you this whole time. And I'm like, yeah, 10 years later, you know? And so that quilt I did, and as quilters, you know, we choose fabrics very carefully. Like, colors mean things to us. So when you look at the picture or the quilt of my grandmother, which I took from a picture, why do you think I don't have her just like one nice shade of color? Why do I have her face kind of broken up? Why do you think I did that?
Multiracial.
My grandmother was multiracial. In the genealogy, it lists my family, especially her parents, as mulattoes, all right? And unfortunately, to be a mulatto means there is probably some SA going on, all right? And so a lot of us are not, all right, all of anything, all right? I always tell people that I present as a Black woman, but I'm 10% white. And that would make sense if my family are listed as mulatto in the genealogy records, right? And if you look on this quilt, I did things that are particular to how I like to quilt. Like, I like to print on fabric. So that's the actual genealogy record of when I found my family. And I knew for sure that was my family because Annie is listed in that genealogy record. That was my mother's mother. Beulah, though, is also listed, and that is who we used to go visit in Chicago at her apartment. That's my mother's aunt. Ione is listed, and I know that's the aunt that raised my mother when her mother died. And so that was a beautiful record to find. I did find a few older records, and I found out that my great-grandfather's name was not Bogue, B-O-G-E, it was Columbus Carr. And so the other thing that I found, and as soon as I told my superintendent this, she got it immediately. Let's see if you get it. I said, Columbus was my great-grandfather's name, which my mother didn't know, but his wife's name, she really didn't know. What do you think his wife's name was? If his name was Columbus, what do you think his name was? Chris. Oh, I see why you would say that. That goes together well. What else?
Maria.
Oh, I see what you would say, Maria. Yeah. That's not in her name, though. I think somebody may have said it. America. Really. And this is what I really found out. America was not uncommon for enslaved women. It was not an uncommon name. Now, I keep bringing this book up, but it's not even my presentation. All right? And all that she carried, the reason why Dr. Miles was able to find out some information about Ashley is because Ashley was an uncommon name for an enslaved young person. Rose, very common, very common. Ashley was not. And that's how she was able to do the research, okay? But when I did the research for my family, I couldn't go back to 1860. Why do you think I couldn't go back to 1860?
No written records because of citizenship.
We were enslaved. And so we were not listed by name unless we were free. And if we were not listed by name, then we were surely enslaved. And so if I were to go, Columbus was born in 1844, I would probably just see what a 16-year-old black male on the car plantation, right? That's what I would probably see. So this quilt is a very universal quilt to what happened to African Americans. Number one, very difficult to find census records. Number two, a lot of us were mixed race, okay? And so when I present this quilt of my grandmother, it is still an intimate story, but it is a collective story also, all right? So we also use narrative quilts to tell social justice stories. And people have been doing that forever. Suffragists use quilts to get people to vote. Abolitionists use quilts to end slavery. What is the largest textile celebration of life that we have even to this day? Which quilt is the largest textile in honor of people's lives to talk about social justice to this day? The AIDS quilt. The AIDS quilt. And it is in social justice of people who were being brutally defamed, you know. We weren't kind when that AIDS quilt came out. We've gotten kinder about things, but if you notice, the AIDS quilt is still going, but it's not at the forefront anymore because it's not as much of a ruckus, you know what I mean? And the people who truly are about that social justice piece are doing the work still. So this narrative quilt that I'm going to talk to you about here, Jamal Williams, is what happened in 2020 that rocked the nation on television. And we've been rocked before because there was Rodney King, but something else happened in 2020. We were all in our homes. George Floyd. Well, this quilt right here, this quilt block, there is a young lady, her name is Sarah Trail, and Sarah Trail has the Social Justice Sewing Academy. And this book right here is the book where she asked quilters all around the country to please take a quilt block and honor someone who was killed by gun violence. Okay, not just African American, not just it might have been domestic violence. Okay, and so I said I'll take someone. All right, a friend of mine said, "Oh, this young lady is doing this. Do you want to do it?" And I said, "Yeah, I'll do one." And I did one for Jamal Williams. And so Jamal Williams was dead, right? He couldn't tell his own story. His family didn't get all of the truth, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But when I did this quilt, I knew that the work that I was about to do was about not just political structures that we were trying to unravel, but I wanted to make sure that I helped tell the story for the family. It sounded like a really straightforward story. Okay, it sounded like a young man, 22, a graduate, a football player, a young man got shot, right? But this is how he got shot. He was actually having a mental break because of George Floyd's killing. Like literally his family reached out and said, listen, something's going on with him. He's really, really struggling. George Floyd got killed, and he is specifically saying that is the reason he's having issues. And so they sought help for him. Remember, it's COVID. So everybody couldn't go with everybody to go into hospitals and all of that. He sought help in a mental institution. He wasn't there 6 hours and he was dead. He wasn't there 6 hours and he's dead. And this was in Muncie, Indiana. Okay? So what happens is they give you a name, they give you a little bit of background, and they give you these hyperlinks, right? So all those red things are hyperlinks. I saw the picture of Jamal, and that hairstyle was very reminiscent of the time. And if you look at the quilt that I have here, I found a picture of a football player, and I put spikes on top of his head, and the football player was kneeling. And I said, you know what, that would be a good scenario to have because kneeling. But I also thought, what is he to his mother? And I got this from my mother because when my sister died, my sister was just shy of 40, and my mother started carrying her baby picture in her wallet. And that's what my sister was. My sister had 5 kids and 3 grandchildren. But to my mother, she was the baby. So to his mother, I knew he was an angel. So it was very important for me to make him earth. Thank you, earth real. Okay, and so, but here's the thing. Remember I told you quilters, we pick fabrics for a reason, right? I bought the fabric off of Etsy and found out it wasn't cotton. It was a slick, and so, but we always have arsenal, right? So I had some freezer paper. I ironed it on freezer paper, and I was able to cut it out and work with it, all right, before I put it on the black paper. And then I was gone to work with it. I put his name on it. We had to put the date on it. I put J. Will, and I just kind of wrote that out because I figured he never made it to the NFL, and probably he would sign his name like that because that was the nickname his friends called him. His number was 22. I made sure that was on the helmet. And so that is the quilt block that I did for him. But back to his story. Every time I looked at the hyperlinks, they're telling the story of what Jamal did, right? But then I kept digging. And what I found out was that he was only there for 6 hours. They said he took the security guard's gun. They actually had to recount that in the news. No, he didn't take the gun from the security guard. Where was the nurse? To this day, I promise you, just 2 weeks ago, I still researched Jamal Williams thinking something's gonna pop up. We have still never found the nurse, the name of the nurse that he supposedly attacked at the time. There's a picture of his family saying, we need answers for Jamal. We need answers for Jamal. So when we talk about social justice stories that we tell, we're talking about the fact that even when we read things in the news, it's not always the correct thing. It's not the whole story. Come back tomorrow. You know how we used to say in the news, tune in tomorrow. We used to say on TV, tune in tomorrow. Tune in tomorrow, because when I first started the quilt, I was so happy that I just wanted to tell the story based on how I wanted his mom to feel, right? And then this story comes out. That's not the whole story. That's why we do social justice quilts, to tell the whole story, to right the wrongs that have been told. And I want you to kind of listen to that theme here in a second. If you look on these, on this picture right here, you'll see his quilt. They take the quilts, we make the block, they then get other quilters to put them on these panels, 2 at a time, and then they take those panels around the country so that people can see them. They then took those panels and they put them in this book. All right, and so where I have the tabs, and there are a couple of more places, the quilt block is in this book, okay? Yes?
How big is the block?
It's probably maybe this size, maybe a little bit longer. So it's not very big, but you can see there are two on each one, okay? So we also tell stories about quilt types. So we have narratives, we tell stories because they belong to us, they belong to our family. We're just as important as anyone else, so we're going to tell our family stories, right? We tell stories about people. So we use stories to advance narratives about people. We use it for social justice. We use it to tell, I have quilts of Tarana Burke for the Me Too movement, all right? I have quilts of, on the back of this one, we did the Soul of Zora Neale Hurston, and they took one of my quilts and they put it on the back of this book here. And so we tell about people, but we also tell stories about quilt types. So the 3 quilt types I'm going to talk about today are Quande quilts. How many people heard of Quande quilts? Yes, you know, they're all the rage, right? We talk about Gee's Bend quilters. How many people know the Gee's Bend quilters? Yes. And then quilts of the Underground Railroad. All right, quilts of the Underground Railroad. But quilting's also found this resurgence, so it's important that we learn about its history, but it's important that we tell the right stories, okay? So here's my Quande. Okay, there it is. Blue goes at the bottom. Okay. So I am not a hand quilter. I bow down to hand quilters. My mama was a hand quilter. Everything she made was done by hand, all right? But I like to challenge myself. The actual first Quande that I ever did is around my Wes Montgomery. How many people know who Wes Montgomery is? Wes Montgomery is one of the premier, he's been gone since 1968, I believe, but he is one of the premier jazz guitarists of our time. His thing was, he had a thumb that was like very prolific. He played with his thumb instead of a pick. And he started doing that because he worked at night, and when he came home, he didn't want to disturb his children or his neighbors. And so he started plucking with his thumb. And lots of people have made songs and tributes to Wes Montgomery. So I have a quilt of Wes Montgomery, and he made it to Atlanta, he made it to France, and he made it to the Indianapolis International Airport, and he has Quande around him. All right, and that was my first one. But this is my first true all Quande quilt. So the Quande come from the city people who were also of the African diaspora, which means they came through the slave trade. Now the thing about the city people is that they all didn't come through the slave trade. Some of them came through slavery, some of them came as merchants, some of them came through the Portuguese, lots of reasons why they got there. But they live in the forest, so they're kind of isolated. And as they're isolated, they created a quilt style that is like all their own. Most quilt styles don't belong to one people because we all see it and we all adapt it. And you know what we do now in the modern world, right? What's the W word we do to it? We make it wonky, right? We make it wonky. We like wonky, right? And so we change it. But what happened with these city people is that because they're isolated, they came up with their own style. And now we're getting it, right? And we're reading about it and we're learning about it. And now it's in all of our museums. And what are we doing? Oh, Quande fast, Quande on your machine, Quande with this. So everybody now, all kind of YouTube's are coming up, but it's always important to tell the story of the original people, all right? And so these women, Henry Druell found them and said, oh, we like them, all right? Almost like Columbus found America, all right? They found these people and said, oh, we love that. And what they do is they take a piece of fabric, and then they take strips of their old saris and they start to stitch all around. They hand stitch, but it's a folded under piece, and you just hand stitch. I promise you I didn't know what the heck I was doing when I was doing it. I just figured I'm gonna make it look like my mama's quilt, like, cause my mama sewed by hand, and I can do it. I didn't think I could do it, but I did it. And because I'm a storyteller, this quilt still tells a story. I don't know what story hers tells, but this one tells the story of my family, and I call it 7. And it's in multiples of 7. And it starts with Columbus Carr, who you met before, my grandmother's quilt, who was born in 1844, and the fact that I can't go past 1860 to find his story, so I had to go forward to my 2-time great niece, Brielle, who was born in 2024. And so that quilt goes up 70 inches, all right? and it's 21 inches wide. So the reason why it's 70 inches, again, starts off blue and it goes up to the sky and it has sun. Why do you think it's blue at the bottom?
Water.
Oh, what kind of water?
Deep ocean water.
Okay, why deep ocean water?
Because slaves are brought in by water.
Ah, they were brought in by water. Good answer, good answer. Not the correct answer, but great premise, right? Now you notice I have been doing something the whole time you give me wrong answers, right? It's called dignifying answers. Because I'm an educator, I dignify answers, right? I used to tell my 8th graders, I love wrong answers. And the reason they would go, you love wrong answers? Yes, because if you're thinking it, somebody else is thinking it too. Thank you for being brave enough to say it out loud. I appreciate it. Why else would it be blue?
Is it jeans? Because of the
Yes, some are blue jeans, yes, but that's not why it's blue. Remember, as a quilter, we purposely pick colors for a reason, right? Why do you think it's blue? I don't know if I gave you any clues earlier, so I'll go ahead and say this. 95% of my family is all from the same state and the same county. Oh, I see why you would say Michigan, because all of that water around there. Yeah, good guess again, but it's not water. Oh, and that's a good hint. It's not water, it's... Oh, I see why you would say Blue Ridge Mountains. That's a good guess, but that's not the wrong one. Is that the right one? Yes. But something else, because you're on the right track. And remember, that's how it works in a classroom. If I were to say no and keep going, nobody else, because I'm saying, oh, good answer, you're still thinking. Now, she said Blue Ridge Mountains. She said blue water, and I said it's not water. So what else is blue? Bluegrass. What is bluegrass? Kentucky. Most of my family is from Elkhart, Kentucky, Todd County, right? And so that's why I made it blue. Now, it goes up into the sun. Remember, I told you it started off with Columbus Carr, and he was born in 1844, so surely he was enslaved. Why do you think I go up into the sun? Because I'm purposefully making a statement about my family. Why do you think I take it up into the sun? And it's from an author, a very famous author. And she made a poem. And she said something about getting up and rising. Maya Angelou, still I rise. The last statement, does anybody know the last stanza of the poem? Okay, it's I am the hope and the dream of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. And I did that purposely because as African Americans, we are told more than anybody else to get over slavery. Get over it. Like nobody sitting in this room were slave owners. Matter of fact, you are not a slave. You were never a slave. Get over it. However, if I were a Holocaust speaker, would you say get over it? If this tattoo was not of my mama's name, but my numbers, you wouldn't tell me get over that, right? What do we say about 9/11? What do we say about the Alamo? Remember the Alamo, right? Why do we tell African Americans to get over slavery? Here's the other thing about this quilt. It's 21 inches wide. You know why? Columbus, Annie, Linda, Tony. There's only 3 generations between me and Columbus. So could you give me a little bit of time to get over it? Here's the other thing. I didn't realize this until I started doing these talks. I touched the hand of a man who touched the hand of a slave. Yeah, you know why? Because Columbus, Annie, Linda. Linda's brother was Frank. Frank lived with his grandfather. Frank came to live with me when I was in the 5th grade. So my uncle, who lived with his grandfather, who was a former enslaved person, actually helped to raise me. But get over it. You know why I love doing these talks? Because someone in one of the little towns that I went to go speak at, after I told her to quit telling us to get over it, came up to me and said, I've only lived in the Midwest. I've only lived in little towns. I've always said get over slavery. I will not say that anymore. That's why I love doing these talks. That's why I love doing these talks, okay? And so it goes up into the sun because I tell people my name is Dr. Tony Jean Dickerson. Like, I don't sit around going, Columbus was a slave. Oh, poor me and my family. Like, nobody sits around doing that, right? And so I wanted people to know that Maya Angelou said, we rise, all right? Purposefully putting the yellow in there. But there's some other purposeful things that I put in there. One is, at the bottom, there's a little strip of darker blue that has black stitching in it. And almost every quilt that I make, I honor my mother, right? I honor her in so many, I honor her, like if you look at Elkhart's library presentation of me and you see that woman, that's my mother. I've put her in about 3, 4, 5 quilts, okay? And so her stitching is in that quilt. I took a piece of her blue jean skirt that she stitched and it's in that quilt. But at the top, there's lace. Unfortunately, the lace belonged to my niece who died from COVID. She was making a quilt in honor of my mother, and she got all this lace free from a lady, and all she had to pay was for shipping. Well, why did I do lace? Why did she get this lace? Because my mother was obsessed with lace. Why are we obsessed with anything? I don't know why she was obsessed with lace, but she absolutely loved lace. If you gave her a t-shirt, she put lace on it. If you gave her a long sleeve shirt and she thought it was too plain, she put lace on it, all right? To the point that my younger brother was getting married. I told his soon-to-be wife, I'll buy your wedding dress. I was feeling myself, you know. I was hoping she wouldn't buy an expensive wedding dress, but I said, I'll buy you a wedding dress. She couldn't find one, and we had gone to 3 or 4 stores. My nephew, who was only 14 years old at the time, decided he was going to come with us. Why a 14-year-old thought it was cool to hang with some women looking for a wedding dress, I don't know, but he did. At the 4th store, he got tired and said, listen, get a dress, put a little lace on it. That's what grandmama would do. And so that has become a saying that I use when I get tired of people being indecisive, put a little lace on it. But I also use it when I'm in my sewing room and I think I am making something that is like I'm like, ooh, I'm putting a little lace on it. Because my mother is very creative and she just loved it, but she was obsessed with lace, okay? She was obsessed with lace. All right, and so that's my Quande quilt. And it's important that when I make this Quande, first of all, when people say, oh, I'm making a Quande quilt, the mistake I just made, we're actually saying I'm making a quilt, because Quande means quilt, right? And so, again, if we know the real story, we'll tell the right story, okay? G's Bend Quilters. How many people heard of G's Bend Quilters? All right, I met G's Bend Quilters, and 2 of them in Kansas City. And let me tell you something, you're not getting me to sing today, all right? They sang during their presentations, and they sound good, okay, too. Now, their quilts can be dated back to the 19th century. They officially live in a place called Boykin, all right? And that was the original slave owner's name from 1816. And they then were sold to a Petway. And if you look at most of their quilts, most of the people are still named Petway, okay? And they kept their owner's name. These members helped to start the Freedom Quilting Bee in 1966, which is not just the G's Bend Quilter. And how that came about is that Martin Luther King, and because they're close to Selma, right, where the Voters' Rights Act impetus was, and because they got angry at these women who went and tried to get their voting right, they cut off the ferry to G's Bend. And when they cut off the ferry to G's Bend, they again have been creating in isolation. That is why the G's Bend quilts look so different. It's because they were created in isolation. And how I explained it to someone, if the 3 of you were just friends and you all lived in some place by yourselves, you'd make something and go, oh, I really like that. And she would go, oh, I really like that too, but I'm putting my little twist on it. But it would still look kind of like yours. And you would go, oh, I like both of yours, but I'm putting my little twist on it. But it would still look kind of the same. That's what happened to G's Bend Quilters. That's why when that quilt historian came along, our collector, William Arnett, came along in the 1980s, and he was like, what the heck am I looking at? Like, I've never seen quilts that look like that. He started curating quilts for the G's Bend Quilters. Now, he was sued in 2007. They won't tell us how much they got for that, but of course that kind of happens. One of the G's Bend Quilters that I met said that one of the things that at least he did for them was to tell them that what they were doing was creating art. She said, I didn't think it was art then, but I know it's art now, okay? And so if you look at the G's Bend thing, this is from 2025. That's in Dublin, Ireland. So they're all over the world. The other thing about the Geesman quilters is when they came to Kansas City, they were still kind of expensive, and I couldn't afford anything but these pot holders. Okay, and so I bought some. I got 2 more at home, but I bought some pot holders from the Geesman quilters. Target sold these Geesman pads and different things. And so a friend of mine, Barb Triscari, gave me this, and I designed my quilts, original quilts in this book. And then, of course, if you are lucky enough to have one, there are 2 that I have. They're out of print right now, but I have 2 of the Geesman books that they have, all right? Geesman quilters, again, it's important that when you see a quilt, even if you see a quilt that's not a Geesman quilt, people will now say, that kind of reminds me of Geesman. If you go to the Center for Black Literature and Culture, downtown Indianapolis at the main library, we have 2 quilts that are in there. One is called African Princesses, and it's up on one side, and the other one is our Alzheimer's quilt that we decided not to raffle because we made a mistake and put the stories of our ancestors in it. Like, the quilter literally quilted the story in there. You would say, oh, that looks kind of like a Geesman type quilt, okay? And so that's because their style is very, very distinctive, okay? And giving credit to people from where it belongs. So this last part I'm going to talk, yes. Yes.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
But I have to leave right at 5.
Yes.
I don't want you to think that it's because
Oh, that's okay. Yes.
I'm looking forward to going to your website.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. All right. So Quilts of the Underground Railroad is my last part. And how many people heard of the Quilts of the Underground Railroad? Okay. What do you see underneath that part? They don't exist. If we're going to tell stories, we have to tell the right stories. There are no Underground Railroad coded quilts. And the reason they're not is because the people who truly know about the Underground Railroad, the people who truly know about quilts, say it didn't happen. Like, it didn't happen. And here's the thing that we got to be careful about. Remember I told you and started with the Daughters of the Confederacy, how they manipulated the narrative. If you manipulate the narrative well enough, all right, then you can get your story. Let me tell you how dangerous that story is. It is such that when I was researching the information and I was looking at specifically flying geese, if you go and click on that for AI only, it'll say a code from the Underground Railroad, blah, 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 blah. You know why? Because if you click the little link that's right there, it'll take you back to the story that said it was the truth. We have to be even more careful in the technology informational era not to keep Washington slept here, George Washington had wooden teeth, Abraham Lincoln chopped down the cherry tree, Betsy Ross, spoiler alert, made the first American flag. All right, we have to stop telling those stories. We can have great quilts that honor traditionals and tradition for African American and enslaved people without making up stories that diminish the horrific nature of slavery. Like, slavery was not cute. And that's what George Wright fought against. He fought against, and he spent his life's work telling people, quit with this Underground Railroad code. It was from one woman from South Carolina who talked about her family passed this down. First of all, he said South Carolinians would not have come the route that she said. The other thing is, if you look at people who tell the story of the Underground Railroad quilts, what they said was there were 10 codes, right? 10 quilts. They would put them out for 5-10 days, and people would tell the story or see that, oh, the first one is called the monkey wrench. And that meant get your things ready. We're getting ready to take off. Where did they get the fabric? Remember, I talked to you about Negro cloth. If the lady who told the stories was Azalea Williams was from South Carolina. South Carolina was the one who passed the law in 1735 that said you had to have Negro cloth. Where would they get the fabric? They only had 1 or 2 outfits a year. They were sleeping on the dirt floor. And they were able to make 10 different quilts? Who gave them the authority to put the quilts out? Like, a lot of enslaved women were making quilts for the family. Do you think the family would have said, what is this? Like, what is this like? And allowed them to put it out? Who saw it? Most of the people who were runaway slaves did it on the spur of the moment. A lot of them were men, single men who said, I'm running tomorrow. Who made the quilts? Where did they, like, how did they do? So it doesn't add up. The other thing is, during the New Deal, the WPA went out and interviewed former enslaved people. They never mentioned the quilts. Harriet Tubman did own a quilt, but she did not use the quilts in the Underground Railroad. And quilts are important to tell the story of Harriet Tubman. You know why? I have 2 blocks that are in a quilt honoring Harriet Tubman's stop on the railroad, all right? And it's hanging in her Harriet Tubman Museum today. But we have to tell the right stories, the true stories, all right? And when we do that, we actually honor people correctly. So I just have a couple of more quilts to show you because we're still using quilts to tell the story, okay? The first one I want to show you is called the monkey wrench, all right? This was also known by 21 other names, like 21 other names. And one of them was the monkey wrench. It dates back to about 1800, 1849. It was one of the first blocks that quilters used. But if you deconstruct quilts, like how many people can deconstruct a quilt with their eye? Like you can look at the quilt and go, oh, I know how they did that. All right, tell me what block you see in there repeated over and over and over again. Yeah, but you see the churn job, but deconstruct it. What other block do you see? Half square triangles. How many people were taught how to do the half square triangle and you've used it in 100 different quilts? That's all it is. It's a half square triangle. All right, and you're going to see the half square triangle again. But this quilt is, if we were to believe it, it would be, the Underground Railroad would say, get your tools ready for the escape. Get ready, what tools? I don't own any tools. Like what, and so when you hear people tell that story, like it doesn't make sense. If it doesn't pass your don't make sense test, it don't make sense. But there's nothing wrong with the monkey wrench. There's absolutely nothing. I made this quilt for, unfortunately, a friend of mine in our guild who was ill. She's getting much, much better. We believe in the healing quality of quilts. So we made her this quilt. Very modern fabrics, isn't it? Very modern size, isn't it? We made it a little bit bigger. So I made this quilt, and this quilt belongs to Verna, and she said, as soon as I get finished talking about it, I need to hurry up and give it to her, okay? And so that's the monkey wrench. So even though it's from the 1800s, we're still using those patterns today. We just make them modern, that's all. The second one is actually my favorite quilt block. And you should know, I want to show this side, the cream side first. You should know what this quilt is. The flying geese, all right? This came about around the 1700s, okay? And does anybody know what that actual pattern is called for this particular flying geese? Yes, it's called the Dutchman's Puzzle or the Flying Dutchman. Yes, and so I used modern fabrics, and I used, but it's the pattern of the Dutchman's Puzzle or the Flying Dutchman. Now, I will have to admit 2 things about this quilt. Number 1, I read and bought the book Hidden in Plain View. I bought it, and I was about to make a series of Underground Railroad quilts, but I'm an academic, and I went down the rabbit hole. And I started researching, and it didn't pass the test. But I already started, and I made the quilt. But there's a second thing I want to admit about it. The reason why I really won't put my things in the Indiana State Fair, what do you notice about my points?
They're perfect.
Are they? Thank you. Blue ribbon for me. Anybody else gonna second the perfect?
Not quite so much.
Not quite so much.
However,
However, so that is my point. I am aesthetically happy with the quilt, right?
All that matters.
It's all that matters. But I made this front in 2016. Last week, remember I told you I was in Crown Point, right? And I made the back of it just 2 weeks ago. So you'll have to hang that one the other way. Also, what do you notice about the Dutchman's Puzzle? What block do you see again? Half square triangle. All right? So now when you see this one, you want to hang it a certain way. So it's going to hang long ways. So, yep, you want to hang it long ways. So take that corner right there. Nope, the other way. Yep, because you want to see the flying geese. Yes. So there are the flying geese again. But this side of the fabric, okay, I would say it's not the Flying Dutchman. It's just my side. So you see me evolve as a quilter. But do you notice anything about the points?
they're good.
They're good. They're 2025 good. But that's what happens to us as quilters, right? We get better at it. It wasn't that I didn't take points seriously. It's just that I didn't know how to use that 1/4 inch or scant 1/4 inch, or the fact that if I had it too close to it, I could go through the stitching and I would still have my point. I didn't know those things in 2016. I know those things in 2025. The one on the other side probably took me a month or so to do. That one took me 3 hours to do. All right, because I just know how to do it now, okay? But it's still flying geese. If this were truly an Underground Railroad quilt, it would say, follow the geese to the north. All right, follow the geese to the north. That's how they flew. But again, it's not. And but we still use these blocks today, and we can use them, and we can enjoy them, and there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, but we have to tell the truth. It is our job, every single one of us, to at least tell the truth in whatever we do, even when we're quilting. All right. And if we're quilting in public spaces, it is more important that we tell the truth, okay? And even with all of those quilts, and I love them, my favorite quilt that I'm gonna end with is this one. And it's probably one of the oldest blocks. And I didn't make this quilt, but when I laid in that rehab center and I was in pain and I couldn't sleep and I had to make a decision, do I truly want some more Oxycontin, or do I want to, like, I told them, I said, I need you to bring me my mama's quilt. And my mama's favorite block is probably the oldest block, which is simply what? A square. All right, we call it a 9-patch, a 4-patch. And if you look closely, it's actually a 4-patch inside of a 9-patch, because each of the patches is inside of the other one. All right, and so we believe in the healing power of quilts, and that's why I love it when my great nieces and nephews say they don't go to bed without their quilt. And I promise you, I think the reason why I'm on the road to recovery is because when I was in that rehab center, I slept under my mama's quilt. And even the CNAs would come in and say, where's your quilt? Where did they put their quilt? Oh, move your quilt while you're eating. We don't want to get anything on it, you know? And so my whole presentation today was simply about, we tell lots of stories. There's lots of power. Intimately, we tell stories. Collectively, we tell stories. Unanimously, stories matter, okay? But if we're going to tell them, it's really important that we put the right spin on it, which is the truth. Okay, and the truth is, I thank you again for coming today. I appreciate your time and your energy, and thank you, thank you, thank you.